George Clooney let it slip in an interview with Drew Barrymore some years ago, 3 years ago, that his wife, Amal Clooney, had helped the Muslim Brotherhood design their new constitution when they took power in Egypt. The Muslim Brotherhood. That's what we're going to talk about today. This is not a tidbit. This is management of reality. That's what that Clooney interview with Barrymore was about. It was management of reality. And that's what we're going to talk about today because we are the management of reality more. Welcome, everybody. This is our English language podcast. From now on, our English language podcast is always going to be on Thursdays, and it is going to air at noon Mexico City time. Okay, so you can count on that from now on. We're not going to move it, so you can always tune into us on Thursdays at noon. Thank you for joining us. Joel Katz is helping us out on the back end, and he's going to be feeding me your questions. From now on, I'm going to try to be a little bit more interactive. So if you are on Facebook or you are on YouTube or on any of the different channels that we're transmitting through, wherever it is that you're seeing us, you can type in your questions, and Joel Katz is going to be looking at those. And we can't answer everything, but he's going to be feeding them to me. We're going to give priority to our our community members from school. If you want to join that, we will explain it at the end of the live. And I'm going to be taking your questions and answering them. And I'll do that in every live, not just this one. Okay, let's get started. What is the event? The event is a talk show interview. Okay, it's a talk show interview 3 years ago in which Drew Barrymore, I don't think she needs an introduction, but if you don't know who Drew Barrymore is, you can just Google it. And in 3 seconds, you will learn that she's one of the most famous actresses in the world. Beloved for her endearing sort of softness, her endearing romantic softness, and also she's very funny. So she's has a huge fan base, right? So it made sense to give her a talk show, and now she has a talk show. Funny, charming lady. And to her talk show comes George Clooney, who also really needs no introduction, but in case you've been living under a rock, he's very famous actor, and often named as the most handsome man in the world, blah, 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 right? So he also has a huge following. And so Drew Barrymore invites George Clooney over to her talk show to do one of these fluff interviews that they do, because that's the format. Celebrities come to these talk shows to hawk their wares, right? So the whole point of the talk show is for the actor, musician, comedian, whatever, to talk about their latest project, what book they wrote or what movies coming out, whatever. And they talk about nothing. Okay, so it's all gossip and what are you doing, and let's share some funny anecdotes, and that's it. It's not meant to be profound. So Clooney, absolutely in that vein, comes in, and Drew Barrymore asks the guy about what it was like when he first met his wife, Amal Clooney. Her maiden name is Amal Alamuddin, and she is a very famous human rights lawyer, internationally known human rights lawyer who works with, all of the establishment institutions, and has a big presence in media and so forth, and in very high-profile cases. Consultant for the UN, consultant for the International Criminal Court. She's this kind of person, and she's a big media personality. So Drew Barrymore asks Clooney, what was it? And she's very beautiful. Okay, so they're this giant celebrity couple, right? Both of them very beautiful, a little bit like the Bennifer episode and so forth. So, and she's Lebanese. I forgot to say this. She's from well, her family is originally from Lebanon. She was born in Lebanon, but her family left Lebanon when she was only 2, according to the story I read, and she grew up her whole life in Britain. So she's basically a British of Lebanese origin. Okay, from a Muslim family. Her father is Druze, and her mother is Sunni Muslim. All right, so Drew Barrymore asks George Clooney, what was it like to meet Amal? You know, because Amal is so tremendous. And Clooney tells the story. We're going to look at it in a second. I think Yoel Katz is getting ready the video. He'll let me know when it's ready. But I'll set briefly the context. So she says, all right, so you meet Amal. What was that like? And Clooney says, well, there was this guy who was coming. My agent called me to tell me that she was coming to my house, right? She was coming to visit with a friend. And my agent said, this is the girl you're going to marry. And Clooney says, no, that's crazy. But when he met her, it was love at first sight, of course. And while he's telling this story, Drew Barrymore is swooning, you know, and doing all the stuff that you would expect. Oh, that's so romantic, blah, blah, blah. And Clooney says, yes, and I, in order to court her, I invited her over to Abbey Road, okay, with a 150-piece orchestra, because Clooney thinks that's very romantic. So I invited over, and I called her, and I said, come on over to Abbey Road. That's where the Beatles used to record. And Amal Alamuddin replies, sure, I'll go meet you just in a little while, because right now I am with the Muslim Brotherhood. And Clooney then explains, because she was over there helping them draft the new constitution for the Egyptians. Okay? Now, what's the context behind that? Well, the context behind that is that the Muslim Brotherhood actually took power in Egypt in 2012. Okay, there was a like what they call a revolution, people protesting in the streets that they wanted an end to the military dictatorship in Egypt. This was the beginning of what they called the Arab Spring. Remember? So so there were all these protests, and the U.S. government pressured Hosni Mubarak, the dictator, to step down. So he steps down. The U.S. government insisted, that was Obama, he insisted on immediate elections. And because of that, the Muslim Brotherhood won, because they were the only ones who could organize with lightning speed, because they already had an organization. And so they won the elections, and the Muslim Brotherhood became the government of Egypt, okay? And so that's what Clooney's talking about. He's talking about that moment. He says he was courting Amal right at the moment when the Muslim Brotherhood had just taken over and in Egypt, and they were going to create a new constitution. And what he said in that interview is that his wife was helping the Muslim Brotherhood draft the new constitution for Egypt. Okay, let's look at this interview, and then I will have quite a few things to say about it. Okay, Yoel, let's go.
Yeah, I'm ready to show it.
Actor, filmmaker, and extraordinary human being, George Clooney. It's always, the origin story is so fascinating for how people become who they are. And in walks Amal.
Yeah.
The most awake, smart. What did you think when you met her?
Well, it's funny. She came to the house in Como with a friend of hers to visit.
Uh-huh.
And immediately I was, but the funniest thing is, Brian Lord, my agent,
I know
called
Brian
me,
forever.
and he had just met Amal and some other thing, and she said, yeah, I'm going to go to Como with a friend of mine. And he said, and he called me up and he said, there's a girl coming to your house that you're going to marry. And I was like, you're an idiot. You know, that's not going to happen. And then in comes Amal, and we we stayed up all night talking, and then
Oh, really?
I started writing her
You wrote her?
a bunch of letters.
Like on pen and paper?
Yeah. We still write letters.
You still write
We
letters?
leave them on the pillow.
Ah!
This is not working out at all, this interview.
But that's romance. So
And then I went to London. She was living in London, and I went to London to score a movie. And I thought, if you're ever going to impress anybody, it's at Abbey Road with the 150-piece orchestra there. And I called her up and said, "You want to come see a visit over at Abbey Road?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm at a meeting at the Muslim Brotherhood right now, and I'll come right over," because she was in the middle of trying to redo a constitution for for Egyptians. Her life and my life are very different, I'll say that.
can I ask what the proposal was like?
All right, so that's the interview bit. So then they change the subject, right? So they go into the proposal and all this stuff. Thank you, Yoel. So let's analyze this. First of all, what is the Muslim Brotherhood? The Muslim Brotherhood is an international terrorist organization. Let that sit for a second. There's no question about this. The Muslim Brotherhood is the creator of Hamas. Okay? Hamas is the terror group that committed the massacre of October 7th, 2023. The worst terrorist attack against the Jewish people since the Holocaust, when they tortured to death 1,200 people. And took 250 hostages. That's the Muslim Brotherhood. The worst monsters on planet Earth. That's what the Muslim Brotherhood is. And Clooney casually drops this information in the middle of a fluffy talk show interview. Can you weigh what this means? The grammatical expectation of a talk show interview is that nothing that you say there is really terribly important. So the fact that this was mentioned in this manner in this interview needs to be interpreted. The first thing you need to know, this is a semiotic interpretation that I'm going to give you. So precisely because nothing profound is supposed to happen in a talk show interview, and that's the grammatical expectation that everybody from our culture has when we watch a talk show interview, right? What your brain does subliminally is it thinks, oh, well, there's nothing bad in this. Nothing could possibly be the matter with Amal Clooney helping the Muslim Brotherhood draft a new constitution for Egypt. That must be a good thing. Why not? I mean, after all, Amal Clooney is a very famous human rights lawyer. And in the culture of the establishment, right, of the progressive establishment that controls our institutions, a human rights lawyer is automatically assumed to be a good person. Okay, so in the kind of the woke status quo establishment moral code that permeates all our institutions in the West, you are supposed to assume that a human rights lawyer is the good guys. Okay, now the implication here is almost coercive because Clooney is a famous actor, which gives him the prestige that people then give him the benefit of the doubt, right? Which is what people do with attractive, famous people, successful people, right? So you want to believe he's a good guy, right? That's also in there. And George Clooney and Amal Clooney together have created something called the Clooney Foundation for Justice. Well, it doesn't get more woke than that in terms of, dog whistles, because woke culture is all about what they call social justice, right? And so, of course, this is a completely corrupted moral system, but they pretend to be fighting oppression and defending tolerance and all of these values that in and of themselves, of course, are good values, right? But in woke culture, they're weaponized and turned into their opposite, right? So, but of course, leftists are deaf to this. They're deaf to this. So they're inside the culture. So when they say Clooney Foundation for Justice, what people on the left, and especially on the woke progressive left, hear is these are the good guys. Clooney Foundation for Justice, the human rights lawyer, of course, working with the UN, right? The UN is supposed to be something good. The United Nations. It's a good thing to unite the nations. So the United Nations must be a good thing, an ethical thing, a moral thing, a positive force for the world, right? And Amal Clooney works with the UN, right? She was advisor to Kofi Annan before he was Secretary General of the UN, when he was the UN's envoy for Syria, right? But he was already a high-profile UN functionary, and she was an advisor to him, right? So she's working with the UN. She's also worked with the International Criminal Court. Oh, and by the way, she's very demanded by the UN. So the UN offered Amal Clooney the job on a small expert panel that would evaluate the accusations against Israel concerning alleged war crimes in Gaza, right? So the UN wanted her, Amal Clooney, to be part of this panel of experts that would help the UN craft its official position on whether Israel has committed war crimes in Gaza, right? So she's very in demand from these kinds of institutions. Now, of course, Amal Clooney is so important that she can turn the UN down, which on that occasion she did. She told the UN she was too busy. You know, I'm Amal Clooney. I'm way too important for the UN at this point. So she was too busy to participate. But when she publicly said that she was too important for the UN, she didn't neglect to add that she was horrified by what was happening in Gaza and the civilian casualties in Gaza and so on and so forth, which of course telegraphs her position, which is the woke position, that Israel is supposedly the bad guy in that conflict and that we ought to be defending only the Arab Palestinians, which is really code for defending Hamas, right? Which is the Muslim Brotherhood, okay? I remind you, okay? So this all tracks, right? But she did take, Amal Clooney did take, we don't really have to speculate on her position on Israel, because she did take a job that the International Criminal Court, the ICC, offered her, okay? So, and that was a very similar job. So the ICC hired her on a person panel, just 3 people, to emit so that the ICC could decide whether it made sense to issue arrest warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant for alleged war crimes in Israel, in Gaza. Okay, so and once she did this work from the Clooney Foundation, she published an article saying, "This is what we concluded. We concluded that the International Criminal Court does have jurisdiction in Palestine," which is a lot of legal nonsense. We have an article. I'm going to show you where it is, so that you can. Well, we're going to put it in the description. I won't waste time with that. We'll put it in the description. But we have an article examining the International Criminal Court's decision on the question of its alleged jurisdiction for Palestine, and it's a lot of legal nonsense. It is so overwhelmingly idiotic the way they reasoned through this, just so that they could say that they had jurisdiction over quote unquote Palestine, that it's actually, I think, a lot of fun to examine their reasoning, because you realize how you can see in the actual arguments that the International Criminal Court employed to reach this conclusion. You can see Western civilization crumbling. You can see critical thinking crumbling. You can see propaganda taking over the entire logical system of legal deliberation in the West. It's really quite remarkable. So I think you should take a look at that article, because it'll be, I think it's a profound portrait of what is going on in the West. And the other thing we document in that article is that the entire International Criminal Court has been taken over by jihadis. The chief prosecutors are Muslims. They give every appearance of being jihadi Muslims. Okay, it's really quite remarkable. This is the International Criminal Court. Okay, so go read it. I think it'll be a good education. But anyway, the International Criminal Court hires Amal Clooney, to be part of this 3-person panel to determine. And she says, we concluded that Palestine is part of the jurisdiction of the court, and also we concluded that Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant committed war crimes in Gaza, right? Wow. So this makes her position very clear. Now you know where she is situated, right? Now you know where she is situated. She is attacking Israel rather than Hamas, rather than the Muslim Brotherhood, right? I mean, she also said that Hamas committed war crimes. I mean, what else is she going to say? But there, she's not stepping on any toes there, because Hamas is actually already designated by the State Department, by the U.S. State Department, and by other Western countries as a terrorist organization. So she's not stepping on any toes, and that's what she has to say anyway, that Hamas committed war crimes and crimes against humanity, because if she doesn't say that, then she will be an obvious stooge, an obvious agent of empire, and you don't want your agents of empire to be obvious stooges. You want them to be subtle stooges. You want them to wear a bit of camouflage so that they can be effective. So obviously she has to say that Hamas committed war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. That's just a forced move. It's a forced grammatical move. But what is very revealing is all the other stuff, right? So this is Amal Clooney, and as George Clooney explains, she consorts with the Muslim Brotherhood, and she was helping the Muslim Brotherhood when they took over Egypt to draft a new constitution. Now, that constitution, remember, Amal Clooney is supposed to be a human rights lawyer, okay? She is supposed to be fighting for social justice, for the people who are denied justice, okay? Well, the constitution, the Muslim Brotherhood constitution for Egypt that she was helping draft, was such an assault on the human rights of the Egyptians, because it was instituting Sharia law, Islamic Sharia law, as the law of state. Okay, that's what this constitution was doing. And this was so offensive to Egyptians, who realized that their human rights were going to be trampled on even worse than under the military dictatorship that they had just replaced, right? That they came out into the streets in force. I mean, the crowds were gigantic, much bigger than the crowds that had toppled the military dictatorship, okay? And the Tamarod movement, which was the grassroots movement that brought all of these people out into the streets to protest, that movement garnered signatures demanding the resignation of the Muslim Brotherhood government. And they garnered more signatures than the Muslim Brotherhood had obtained votes in the election. All right? That's how offensive the Muslim Brotherhood constitution that Amal Clooney was helping write was to the Egyptians. It scared them more than the military dictatorship they had just deposed. Let that sink in. She's supposed to be a human rights lawyer. She was going to create a human rights disaster. But that's not the only thing. Amal Clooney has never criticized Qatar. Qatar is the greatest human rights disaster in the entire world. On planet Earth, well, okay, so actually, we might have a reasoned debate about whether North Korea or Qatar are, which one is worse. I mean, once you get to that level of extreme abuse of human beings, it's hard to know what is worse, and you can have a reasonable disagreement about it. But let's say that Qatar is in that category. Okay, it's in the same category with North Korea. The main difference between North Korea and Qatar is that Qatar is communist and forgive me, North Korea is communist and Qatar is capitalist. That's the main difference. But they are both slave states. Okay, they're both slave states. One, Qatar, has a jihadi ideology, and the other one, North Korea, has a communist ideology. But they're both slave states. And we also have an article on our website, Management of Reality, on how Qatar works. Okay, so if you want to know deeply what Qatar is like, and how the slaves suffer in Qatar, and how many of them there are, and all those details, and what the State Department has had to say about it, because the State Department has been relatively frank in its internal documents about what happens in Qatar. Okay, you can read that article, and I think it's a good education about Qatar and the place it occupies in the world. But it's a slave state, so we're going to put it in the description. There are 2 million slaves suffering in Qatar, more or less. 2 million slaves. And when I say slaves, you might think I'm, exaggerating or using the word slave as a metaphor. Please erase any such intuition from your mind. When I say slave, I'm speaking quite literally. I'm not saying people that work too much and that perhaps don't have full access to a modern legal system, or no. I'm talking about people who are owned. They have a master. They cannot leave. They have no freedom to move wherever they want. They can't refuse their master. They can't leave the country. They take their passports away. So these are immigrants from different kinds of countries coming from poor parts of the world. Philippines, North Africa, India, Bangladesh, places like that, Malaysia, and they are invited into Qatar with false promises, that they're going to get a good job, blah, blah, blah. Once they get into Qatar, they take away their passports. They can no longer leave, and they become basically the property of the Qatari state and of the particular individuals who employ them. And they are physically abused. They are sexually abused. There's a lot of sexual slavery in Qatar. And Qatar is a conduit for slaves that go to other countries. So it's not only a slave state, it's part of the slave trade network. Okay, it's a big node in the slave trade network. So these people are physically abused, they're sexually abused, they're not paid, and when they are no longer needed, they're thrown to the streets to die of hunger. Okay, Qatar is one of the wealthiest places in the world. There are people living in the streets. They keep them out of sight of the tourists, of course. In Qatar, it's really amazing. You got these solid gold Rolls Royces circulating in the streets, and there are people who don't have enough to eat, and those are the slaves. Okay, so that's Qatar. Okay, it's a slave state. Go read about it. I'm not making this up. It's a slave state. It's a capitalist slave state, but in other ways, it is very similar to North Korea. So it's a human rights disaster on a colossal scale, one of the worst human rights disasters that the planet has ever experienced. That's what Qatar is. And Amal Clooney, an internationally famous human rights lawyer, has never uttered a peep about the slaves that suffer in Qatar, which are about 2 million and are 94% of the economically active population of Qatar. Okay, nor has she ever uttered a peep about the 16 million slaves total that suffer in the entirety of the Gulf states. So the Gulf states are Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and I think that's it. And in all of those states, including Saudi Arabia, there are many slaves in this system of slavery that they call kafala. They call it kafala so that they won't say slavery, but it's slavery. So she's never uttered a peep about this, or at least none that I can find. So I asked ChatGPT to do the most thorough search possible in every possible corner of documentation where Amal Clooney might have registered a criticism about Qatar for its human rights abuses of 2 million human beings. And I couldn't, and ChatGPT told me there's nothing. I couldn't find anything. So then I went to the Clooney Foundation for Justice website. The Clooney Foundation for Justice, because these people care about justice. So maybe the Clooney Foundation for Justice has some document that mentions Qatar, right? There was one. And in that document, Qatar is criticized because it is a conduit for illegal antiquities. Let that sink in. This is Amal Clooney's criticism of Qatar, that it is a conduit for illegal antiquities. This is like accusing Sauron of not tipping at the restaurant. Okay, so he's the Lord of Mordor. He is enslaving all of Middle Earth. But Amal Clooney is upset that he didn't properly tip the waiter at the restaurant. That's the level of discourse we're talking about here. So now you know who she is, right? She can't criticize Qatar because Qatar is part of the establishment and Amal Clooney is part of the establishment. So Qatar, Hamas you can criticize because the establishment criticizes Hamas, you see, officially. They're, of course, assisting Hamas every chance they get. But in the public discourse, they criticize Hamas. They say Hamas is a terrorist organization. So Amal Clooney obediently says, yes, Hamas committed war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. But Qatar, no, she can't criticize Qatar because Qatar is the host of the largest United States military base in the Middle East. And the nerve center for Central Command, or CENTCOM, which is where decisions are made for the projection of U.S. military power in the entire region of North Africa, Middle East, and Central Asia. It's very, very important. Qatar is hugely important. The Al Udeid base next to the Qatari capital of Doha, which is where the CENTCOM's headquarters are, is very, very important. Okay, this is the U.S. empire. Okay, so of course she doesn't criticize Qatar. Of course she doesn't criticize Qatar. Qatar is a human rights disaster, but this human rights lawyer has no problem with it, or none that she has ever expressed in public. All right, so that's Amal Clooney, and I must add one more detail, which is entirely relevant to this story, which is that Qatar is Muslim Brotherhood Central. So, of course, there is every reason for Amal Clooney never to utter a word against Qatar because she's working with the Muslim Brotherhood. She's drafting the Muslim Brotherhood constitution for the new Sharia-based Egypt, right? That's what she was doing in 2012. So now that we know this context, well, there's one more thing I should add, one more thing to have the full context, which is that the Clooneys, George and Amal Clooney, are close friends with Barack Hussein Obama and wife. Okay, I forgot the name of Obama's wife, Michelle Obama. So they're good friends. George and Amal are good friends with Barack and Michelle. Such close friends that they even vacation together. Okay, they're like bosom buddies. And Obama is quite fond of the Muslim Brotherhood. So it all tracks, you see? It all tracks. But Barack Hussein Obama, personally installed the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. Okay, he sent, and if you want to know all of the details about this, both about my interpretation of the Drew Barry interview, which is what I've been doing in the surrounding context, and also this other thing that I'm talking about right now, which is how Barack Obama installed the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, okay, which I'm going to describe in a second, then do go to the website. I'm going to show you the articles on the screen for a second, just so that you know where to go, because we just published this, and you really, I think you will find it very interesting. So you're looking at my screen right now. Okay, so this over here is the article on the interview where George Clooney let it slip that his wife had helped design the Muslim Brotherhood Constitution for Egypt. Okay, there he is smiling with his buddy Barack Hussein Obama. And this article over here tells the story of how Barack Obama installed the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt back in the period 2011-2012. Okay. I'm going to get out now, come back to, yeah, there we go. Okay, so before I go to the Obama story, let me answer a question here from someone who is saying, hey, Francisco, how can Amal, a woman, help create the Muslim Brotherhood Constitution? Isn't it true that women don't have any rights in the Muslim law, not to say to create the entire Constitution? What is your perspective? Well, it is not necessarily an internationally known fact. Before Clooney mentions it in that Drew Barry interview, that Amal Clooney was helping the Muslim Brotherhood draft their constitution. I don't know whether this was generally known, but it makes sense that it should be known in some circles, because precisely because of what you're saying, precisely because you're saying that Muslim law is a human rights violation of a woman's rights, right? Precisely because of that, if a prominent human rights lawyer, an internationally known human rights lawyer, is seen helping the Muslim Brotherhood draft their new constitution, that in the grammatical system is interpreted as, oh, the Muslim Brotherhood can't be so bad. So the way to interpret this is that she was functioning just by her presence. Forget about whether she really wrote any articles for the new constitution. I don't know whether she really did that. What is important is that she is seen to be participating, because she then whitewashes the Muslim Brotherhood, which there was a huge operation to whitewash the Muslim Brotherhood, and she was part of it. So, and that's what the article on Obama is talking about. So let me now segue into that, because your question allows me to do that. What Barack Obama was doing in Egypt is that first he sent, so there were these protests, right? So there's a grassroots movement, very broad-based. It was not just sympathizers of the Muslim Brotherhood that wanted the military dictatorship out of Egypt. No, it was a very broad cross-section of the Egyptian population that wanted to get rid of the military dictatorship and try out some form of democracy, okay? This was the beginning of what people call the Arab Spring. And so in the middle of these widespread protests with huge throngs of people in the streets in Cairo and other cities, the US government sends Frank G. Wisner, who, by the way, is the son of the guy by the same name, Frank Wisner, who used to be in charge of clandestine operations of the CIA. Okay, so they send Frank Wisner Jr., Frank G. Wisner, who had been ambassador to Egypt in the past. They send him to talk to Hosni Mubarak and tell Hosni Mubarak, who was he was the president of Egypt, he was the general that was functioning as the president of Egypt. Wisner tells him, you have to step down. We, the empire, insist that you step down. And the way this works, of course, is that you have to step down because Egypt is a province of the CIA. Okay, the CIA put Gamal Abdel Nasser in power and then sent German Nazis to train his security forces. We're going to be publishing about that very, very soon in the next few days. And Hosni Mubarak is part of the structure that Nasser created in Egypt, the military dictatorship that Gamal Abdel Nasser created in Egypt. So they all understand who the boss is. You know, they're not confused. They know that the U.S. is the boss, and they have to, follow orders. So when Frank G. Wisner is sent to host, I mean, this is so dramatic. It's incredible. It means that Egypt has a zero independence. You see, because there's nothing more dramatic politically in any country under any system than the resignation of a head of state. I mean, other than the assassination of a head of state, right? So this is about the most dramatic thing possible that you can imagine politically. And that's precisely the result that the US achieves in Egypt. So obviously they have zero independence. So Obama sends Frank Wisner to tell Hosni Mubarak, you must step down, you must hold elections. But the other thing that the US insisted on, and that the Egyptians evidently had to follow, was that the elections should be held immediately, like with a delay of just a few months, which meant that the elections would be won by the Muslim Brotherhood with all probability, because it was the only organization that had the structure to move quickly enough in the timetable that the US government was insisting on to produce a party that could really compete in the elections. All right. So both things, forcing Mubarak out and demanding an immediate election, both were, one could argue, designed to get the Muslim Brotherhood into power. Now, the rest of the context confirms that, because before this, before Obama forced Hosni Mubarak out, he had made a trip to Egypt shortly after being inaugurated as president. He had made a trip to Egypt to give a speech there. And it was a speech addressed to Muslims, this kind of thing that Obama did. He was always speaking to Muslims. Muslims were very important to Obama in his whole public discourse, right? So he went to Cairo to speak to Muslims, to give a big speech, very deliberate stuff. And it was reported in the Arab media that the Obama team had insisted that leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood be invited to attend his speech, be allowed to attend his speech. Okay, very significant stuff. That's real diplomatic language, because the Muslim Brotherhood was outlawed in Egypt when Obama insisted that the leaders of this outlawed, considered criminal organization in Egypt, considered terrorist organization in Egypt, be invited, be allowed to attend the speech of the US president. Again, the president is behaving like the emperor that he really is. He is giving orders to the Egyptian government. I understand that you don't like this organization, and that you consider it a criminal organization, even a terrorist organization, and that you have outlawed it. But I want the leaders of this organization to attend my speech. Why? Because I'm the emperor. And it happened, right? Now, what was the message that, so when Obama does this, he's sending a very clear message to the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood, right? He's saying, you're my pets. I'm on your side. Why else would he do that? And then in the speech, what does he do? He said many amazing things, but this is the most amazing thing he said. I'm going to quote him. It's actually, let me put the quote on the screen. You need to see this. You have to see it. Let me see. That's not the one. This is the one. Okay, but check it out. Yeah, it's this article. So I have it right here. It's one of my longer ones. No, I didn't see it. Hold on. Be patient. I'll find it. Can't believe I can't find it. All right, I won't continue with your suffering. It must be in the other one. What Barack Obama said is this, and you can look at the exact quote later. Open quote. I consider it one of my most important duties as President of the United States to combat negative stereotypes of Islam wherever they appear. Close quote. The President of the United States said in Cairo, in a speech addressed to Muslims, to which he insisted that the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood be allowed to attend, that he considers it one of his prime responsibilities as President of the United States to fight negative stereotypes of Islam wherever they appear. That's a remarkable interpretation of his responsibilities as President of the United States. But now imagine that you are one of the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood and you're hearing this remarkable statement at this speech that the US president is giving in Cairo, to which he insisted that you go. How do you interpret this? Well, it's quite obvious. There's no great veil of vagueness or indirectness that is preventing you from understanding. What the president is saying very clearly is, get ready because you're next. That's what he's saying. Mubarak is going out and you're next. And that's exactly what happened. And the other confirmation of this interpretation comes after, because as I was telling you earlier, the Muslim Brotherhood constitution that, according to husband George Clooney, Amal Clooney was helping design, was so offensive to the Egyptians that they came out into the streets to protest and garnered even more signatures now in favor of the resignation of the Muslim Brotherhood than people had voted for them, right? And that gave cover to the Egyptian generals to depose the Muslim Brotherhood and restore the military dictatorship, okay? And that's what they did. They got rid of the Muslim Brotherhoods and the Muslim Brotherhood, and they reimposed themselves. And as you will see in the article that we're going to put in the description, Obama was not pleased. He was very upset, very, very upset. This displeasure was expressed even before the military moved against the Muslim Brotherhood. So the initial context before that happened was you have the Muslim Brotherhood still in power, and you have gigantic throngs of people in Egyptian cities protesting the Muslim Brotherhood constitution and demanding that the Muslim Brotherhood resign, right? That's the context. And Obama got very worried that he might lose the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, which he had worked so hard to install. And so through the US ambassador to Egypt, her name is Ann Patterson, he expressed his displeasure, and Ann Patterson came out to attack the protesters. To attack the protesters. That's what the US ambassador to Egypt did. Ann Patterson, go look it up. These were peaceful protesters, peaceful, who were being attacked by the sympathizers of the Muslim Brotherhood in the streets. It was a kind of it had the structure of a pogrom, because the sympathizers would do the attacking of the peaceful protesters, but what the Muslim Brotherhood government would do is they would pull back the police. So instead of sending the police to stop the violence, they would pull it back. Okay, and in the middle of that, the U.S. ambassador to Egypt, Ann Patterson, comes out to criticize the protesters and to defend the Muslim Brotherhood government. And her statements were so extreme that it became a common meme among the protesters, among the opponents of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, to say, to interpret that Ann Patterson was working for the CIA because the CIA wanted the Muslim Brotherhood in power in Egypt. So it became a conspiracy theory shared by many, many Egyptians that Ann Patterson was actually working with the Muslim Brotherhood, with the CIA, with the Muslim Brotherhood, to force the Muslim Brotherhood upon Egyptians. Okay, and of course, part of this theory, which is of course my theory, was defended with the other stuff I've been telling you, with the fact that the Americans had forced Mubarak out and had insisted in all that stuff, right, was part of this theory. I think they were right. I think that's exactly what was going on, and the behavior of the U.S. government is entirely consistent with that particular conspiracy theory. Okay, so that's the entire context. Now let's go back to the interview. You have to think about the semiotic impact of the interview, okay? So because everybody assumes that a talk show interview is about superficial stuff, it's fluff, nothing really profound is going to be happening there, okay? What happens in the mind of the casual viewer of this interview is that the Muslim Brotherhood is whitewashed with the prestige of the Clooneys. You see? They're putting lipstick on the pig. That's what the Clooneys are doing. They're using their prestige as, their leftist woke prestige, okay, to make the Muslim Brotherhood seem something palatable. Because if Amal Clooney from the Clooney Foundation for Justice, married to George Clooney, friend of the Obamas, right, who's a saint to the left, because both Muslims, and of course Amal Clooney is a Muslim, and both Muslims and blacks are sacred to the left, right? So you're always supposed to say that any Muslim, any black person is a good person, because that's how woke grammar operates. Of course, I'm not saying that they're all bad people. I'm not saying the opposite. I'm just saying that in the grammar of the woke left, Muslims and blacks are sacred. That's how they're treated, right? So you've got Obama. So you've got all of the buttons that would be pressed in the woke mind, so that they conclude the Muslim Brotherhood must be kosher. It must be a good thing, right? Because the Clooneys are good. They must be good because they produced the Clooney Foundation for Justice, and justice is good. Amal Clooney is a human rights lawyer, and human rights are good. She's a Muslim, and Muslims are good to the woke. And they're friends with the Obamas, who are black, and blacks are good to the woke. Robert. So all of the buttons are pushed. This is semiotics. This is the management of reality, right? This is the controlling of narrative. So they push all of these symbolic buttons, and Clooney says it in passing. You see, he says it in passing like it's just the most normal thing. It's the most normal. The anecdote is not even about that. The anecdote is about his courtship of Amal Clooney. So he says it entirely in passing in this celebrity interview, that his wife was assisting the Muslim Brotherhood Constitution, the constitution of what happens to be a terrorist organization, okay? He says it in passing, and so subliminally, the mind that is affected by the, let us say, the status quo meaning system, right? Anybody who is affected by the status quo meaning system, who hasn't read our articles, right? Who is still in the matrix created by the woke left that has been institutionalized everywhere, that mind, without even noticing, concludes that the Muslim Brotherhood is a good thing, a positive thing. What else could it be if Amal Clooney is designing their constitution? You see? This was not an innocent move. Now, notice the next thing that Clooney says in the interview. He says, in other words, right after he says that Amal Clooney was doing this high-level stuff for the new government, the Muslim Brotherhood government in Egypt, right after he says that, as if it were a very funny joke, but it's not really a joke, he says, our lives are very different, okay? My life as George Clooney and her life as Amal Clooney are very different. The implication is she's a powerful mover and shaker in the political world. I'm just an actor. Okay? And that's a load of crap. Because as we just said, George Clooney is very good friends with Obama, most powerful man in the world as US president, right? And still a very big influence in the Democratic Party and therefore in US politics, right? Everybody knows this. So he's intimate friends with Obama. He's obviously not just an actor. He also organizes these huge fundraisers for the Democratic Party. In fact, he boasted that he organized the biggest Democratic Party fundraiser for Biden in the last election. And it was not the first one. And after that fundraiser, he penned an editorial in the New York Times, the most important newspaper in the world, right? He penned an editorial after the fundraiser that he organized for Biden, right? The biggest one ever. He pens a New York Times editorial to accuse Biden of being senile. George Clooney did this. He didn't use the word senile, but he didn't have to. It was obvious, right? And he did it in the New York Times. And it was widely interpreted that he was channeling Obama because Obama wanted to get rid of Biden and put Kamala Harris instead as presidential candidate. Okay. Now, I think that's all theater anyway. I think people who have read me know that I think the CIA is pulling all of the strings. I'm a conspiracy theorist through and through, and I don't apologize for it because I can document that the deep state really does control the meaning system, and I have in my articles, and you can go read them. So I don't think that whole thing is really. That I don't think there's any independence at the top between the Republican and Democratic parties from the CIA. They're all the same thing. So the fundraiser, the New York Times editorial, the whole story about channeling Obama to get rid of Biden, to put Harris, blah, blah, blah. That's all management of reality. It's a story. It's theater. But even so, George Clooney is clearly a central protagonist of that power theater. So he's clearly not just an actor, and he's not less important than Amal Clooney. He's way more important, right? So that's all fakery. It's all fakery. The whole comment that, her life is very different because implication, I'm just an actor. That's all nonsense. George Clooney is very important. But he says it like that, and he makes that attempt at a joke. He's as funny as a brick, is what I say in my article. He's just not funny, but he does that attempt at a joke in passing because he wants to slip in the stuff about Amal Clooney assisting the Muslim Brotherhood because they're whitewashing the Muslim Brotherhood. And that intersects with what Trump is doing now. Okay, that's the final revelation is what Trump is doing now, because you could say, well, all of this is just Obama, Biden, Harris, right? Those are the people that are pro-Muslim Brotherhood. Trump is different, right? Trump has been selling himself as an anti-jihadist for the longest time, but clearly. Trump is no different from Biden. I mean, Trump has been assisting the jihadis on every single one of Israel's frontiers. He stopped the Israelis from destroying Hezbollah in Lebanon. He stopped them from liberating Syria from ISIS. He forced Netanyahu to sign a ceasefire with the Lebanese government, pretending that the Lebanese government is not controlled by Hezbollah, which of course it is. And everybody who looks at this for 5 minutes knows it. And then he forced Netanyahu to recognize, as he did, the ISIS government in Syria. He stopped the Israelis from destroying the Ayatollahs in Iran. He had a huge tantrum when there was an Israeli attack against the Hamas terrorists that Qatar was protecting, right? And then he extended NATO-level protection for Qatar, so that Israel understands that they can never attack Qatar again. Remember, Qatar is the author of this October 7th massacre. That's Qatar is the intellectual author of that. They are the sugar daddies of Hamas. Okay, that's who Trump is protecting, and Qatar is the Muslim Brotherhood. They are the main financiers of the Muslim Brotherhood. And Trump stopped the destruction of Hamas in Gaza when the Israelis were getting ready to enter Gaza City, which was the last thing they controlled, and the Israelis were going to wipe them out finally. Trump jumped and insisted on a ceasefire, and he saved Hamas. Okay, and he is selling all kinds of new weapons to Saudi Arabia, which is a jihadi empire. That is, and the new weapons that he's giving Saudi Arabia are going to destroy the asymmetry in Israel's favor. And he is allowing the Egyptians to conduct military exercises in the Sinai in violation of the peace treaty with Israel, in preparation for the upcoming invasion of Israel from Egypt, which is coming very soon. Okay, so Trump is doing all of that. So obviously, he is a pro-jihadi president, just like Obama. There's no real difference. The only difference is in the rhetoric, but you should never pay attention to that. The only thing you should ever pay attention to, if you don't want to be manipulated, is the actual policies. The policies tell you what they're trying to do. The discourse is always there to confuse you. Okay, so what has Trump recently done to confuse you? He initiated a process, an administrative process, that ostensibly is for his experts to decide whether certain parts of the Muslim Brotherhood should be designated terrorist organizations. Certain parts, but not others, you see? So the Trump administration is getting ready to pick and choose certain components of the Muslim Brotherhood as terrorist and others not, okay? Now, this discourse is for the right. Okay, Clooney was speaking to the left. Now Trump is speaking to the right. And this is also to whitewash the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay, now, why is the language to the right different? Because on the right, you cannot manipulate them with woke grammar and with woke symbols. Okay, they're not paying attention to that. They're immune to that. They're anti-woke on the right. So you need a different language. On the right, on the non-woke or anti-woke right, people are aware that the Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist organization. And they want the Muslim Brotherhood designated as a terrorist organization. Believe it or not, it ain't. The Muslim Brotherhood is still not designated by the State Department as a terrorist organization. So this is what the people on the right want, okay? So to them, what you have to give them is a process to designate at least some parts of the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization, in the hopes that that will appease people on the right. Okay, they will say, "Oh well, okay, so now it's being done. Maybe not the whole Muslim Brotherhood, but we're starting to designate parts of the Muslim Brotherhood, and maybe and if this is done with sufficient cleverness." Maybe they can even be convinced through their attachment to their right-wing president, whom they adore with idolatry, right? If he tells them, look, these parts of the Muslim Brotherhood are okay, the idolatry may get them to agree, okay? So this is the way in which the components that have to be crucially whitewashed, because they're part of the let us say, public and obvious power deployment of the U.S. empire, right? So they cannot be designated terrorist organizations because that would gum up the institutional works, right? So what Trump's process is going to do, it's going to whitewash certain parts of the Muslim Brotherhood. For example, Qatar. Qatar will not be designated a terrorist state because that's where the most important U.S. military base is stationed, right? So you can't do that. So Qatar will be immune from this process, and other, charities and things that the Muslim Brotherhood uses to move funds to the terrorists, those will also be exempted, you see. And so the Muslim Brotherhood will retain its freedom of action, even as the U.S. government designates Hamas and Islamic Jihad or whatever, different groups as actual terrorists. That's what they're going to do. And this will appease at least some people on the right, and they hope everybody on the right. And they have good reasons to think this is going to work, because the Trump idolatry on the right is about as bad as Trump derangement syndrome on the left. Okay, they're both pathologies where if you have Trump derangement syndrome, then you have to say everything that Trump says or does is a bad thing. And if you have Trump idolatry, then you have to say that everything that Trump does or says is a good thing. They're both ridiculous, right? So both the right and the left are ridiculous because people on both the left and the right are being manipulated in different ways by the same masters of the system, who are the people who run the CIA, and through the CIA, the entire media and academic systems, and this established institutional systems that create meaning. Right, that create meaning for us and manage our reality. They tell us what supposedly is going on and what it means. But of course, they have a different narrative for the right than for the left, because of course, these are two different cultures that need to be addressed in different ways. Okay, but they're smart enough to do it because of course they're geniuses. If they weren't geniuses, they wouldn't be running the most powerful empire in history. And anybody out there listening to me who thinks that anything the CIA has done in the Middle East or the U.S. government, if you want to say U.S. government instead of CIA, I don't mind. But if you want to say that anything the U.S. government has done in the Middle East is a mistake, because every time they move, the jihadis get stronger, you should think again. That's exactly what they want. But they have to pretend to be making mistakes because obviously, within the grammar of Western democracy, again, this is semiotics, within the grammar of Western democracy, you can't say that terrorism is good or that you are funding terrorism. There will be a revolution. We will depose them. If all, just imagine the consequence all of a sudden, the entire US population understanding that their own government is the main force behind world jihad. Just imagine what would happen. Americans would depose their own government. That's what would happen. So of course they can't say that's what they're doing. It's grammatically forbidden. So every time they have a major, what do you call it, intervention in the Middle East, and the consequence of that intervention is that jihadis get stronger. Like, for example, when they invaded Iraq, there was no real problem with jihadism in Iraq. I mean, there was a military dictatorship and it was fascist and all that, but it wasn't as bad as it became after the U.S. invasion, because the U.S. invasion produced an explosion of jihadi terror in Iraq that spilled over into Syria, right? So, the U.S. invasion of Iraq, man, we really bungled it there. Right? This is what the New York Times will tell you, because the New York Times, of course, is controlled by the CIA, right? So the New York Times will say, "Oh, look how they screwed up." The thing the New York Times will never say is, "This is what they wanted." And the U.S. government, of course, will say, they will confess their mistakes. They will say, "Oh, we really screwed up. We're going to try to do better," right? Because that's the only interpretation grammatically acceptable to the democratic citizenry of the United States. That's why the discourse is like that, okay? But if you think that discourse reflects reality, if you think that they really are fucking up in the Middle East, then I suggest you read our articles on the history of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, because U.S. policy in the Middle East has been perfectly consistent. It never varies. Every time they spend billions of dollars doing something in the Middle East, the jihadis get way stronger. And that's why the state of Israel right now is on the edge of destruction. That's why. It's been a policy of encirclement. It has required an enormous amount of money and great control of the meaning-making and reality managing system. But it is nearly complete. And this is what I explained in my book, The Collapse of the West, The Next Holocaust and Its Consequences, which second edition is coming out this week. So stay tuned. Now it's only in Spanish, but the update to that book and an explanation of the prediction and both for Israel, for the Jewish people, and for the West, will come out in English, and it will be a good digest of what I do in the book. In addition to being an update on what has happened since it was published and since its prediction came true on October 7th. Okay, so that's my interpretation of the Drew Barrymore interview of George Clooney, which I think is a very useful interview because it shines a light on the structure of the entire system. And I hope it'll work. I hope the two articles I wrote on this, which are now the two main articles on our website, I hope those will be a good entry point for people who don't know this work. You can start clicking on the support articles that I link you to, also on our website, and that document other aspects of the system that you need to understand in order for the entire model to click. So the promise of our website is that if you read enough articles, and it doesn't really matter in which order you read them, but if you read a critical mass of articles, your brain will perceive the pattern. You'll get it. You'll understand what's going on, and then you can just keep reading to really know it all. But you only need to read, in my view, if you start reading anywhere and you read about 10 articles, I think your brain will produce the model. And then if you keep reading, you will just realize that your intuition was correct and that you already know, you can already predict what I'm saying about anything. If you're skeptical about any particular, you can just check my footnotes and go see if I lied to you about anything, because one of the rules for my work is that I don't make any claims that I cannot footnote with a source that you can go check, so that you don't have to trust me. The idea is that you should distrust me. And in fact, the best way to read me is to read me trying to refute me. This is what I recommend, because trying to refute the communication you hear is the essence of the scientific process. And you should retain as a model only those parts of what people are claiming that you were unable to refute. That's the essence of the scientific process. So please read me with as much skepticism as you like. If you think I'm crazy, fine, that's welcome. If you think I'm a loser, that's welcome. If you think I'm completely mistaken, that I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist, I don't care. That's what I want. I want you to read me with that attitude, trying to refute me, because then if you fail, there will be a real moment of enlightenment. Whereas if you just read me thinking, well, maybe he's right, maybe not, I don't know, instead of doing the work of finding out, enlightenment will not happen. Enlightenment comes when you try to refute me and you fail. Okay, and I'm assuming that you will, but if you don't, if on any particular you don't fail, please send me a message. If I've said anything that is an error, I'm the first one who will want to correct it. And if the correcting that detail requires changing something in the model, I will do that too, because what I want is a model that predicts the future, just like I did when I said that there would be a great mass killing of Jews in Israel. I published the prediction in 2013. Everybody said I was crazy. And then 10 years later, on October 7th, unfortunately, I was proved right. The whole point of writing the book was proving me wrong. I was hoping that by writing the book, people would be alerted to this danger. And if I sold enough copies, and I was being an optimist, if I sold enough copies, maybe that catastrophe could be averted. But unfortunately, the prediction came true. And if we don't move fast, it will continue to come true. In other words, the next Holocaust that I predicted is ongoing. It began on October 7th. I think I'm back now. Am I, Joel?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so I was saying, but the Holocaust is that I predicted is ongoing, and the encirclement of Israel continues. That's what Trump's policy is about, and we have quite a few articles analyzing Trump's policy. So if you want to get your feet wet with that, go right ahead. Anyway, that's today's live podcast. Before I finish, I want to show you the website where you can make a donation if you think our work should be supported. So let me share my screen with you right now. And if you do support us, many thanks. I mean, we do need it. Doing this work costs money, and we have a whole staff helping us to do this quality work and research and the podcast and so forth. So please consider coming to management of reality.com. And you will see a bunch of buttons here that take you to all of our content. Okay, so this is the English podcast, so let me point out that it has an English translation. So you can go check out our online course. That one's in Spanish, unfortunately. But our articles are all in English. Our books are in Spanish. We have an English language YouTube channel that we're going to be also linking to our Substack page from now on. And everything in the English YouTube channel is obviously in English. We have a lot of content there already. Interviews, documentaries, live broadcasts, all kinds of stuff. And it really has a lot of content now. We don't have a lot of subscribers yet, but that's not for lack of content. So if you go there, you'll see a lot of stuff. And then if you want to give us a little something to help us out, you can do it through the Substack page, or you can make a direct donation to us here. We have all these different buttons for you to do either a one-time donation, or else what we prefer is a membership donation. Where you commit to give us a monthly amount. That really helps a lot. So anyway, that's my pitch. I hope you find our work useful, and we will see you at our next live podcast, which will be again on Thursday, noon Mexico City time. That's going to be our schedule from now on, and we hope you will share because it's really important to get this message across to our fellow Westerners. We are in a big fight for the future of the West, and it is far from obvious that the West can survive this crisis, but it is definitely true that it won't survive if we don't fight for it. There are signs that people in Britain are waking up and making the decision to fight for Britain. This is also happening in France, in Portugal. It's happening in different places. It's happening in Denmark, where the government, and it's a leftist government, but they don't want the right-wingers to take over. So the leftist government in Denmark is kicking the Muslims out. And it is restricting immigration. They're not letting these quote unquote asylum seekers in anymore. In Sweden, there is a rising party that may win the next election that is promising to kick Muslim immigrants out because of the tremendous violence that they have produced in Sweden and the abuses against women and so on and so forth. It's making Sweden unlivable. So anyway, in Holland, we have the Geert Wilders Freedom Party, and we have Tommy Robinson in Britain. Look, it's happening. The defense of the West is happening, but we all have to join it. We all have to join it. And one little thing you can do is give us a contribution so that we can do this work better and reach more people. But if you can't do that, at least share, at least talk to people, learn the stuff, and fight for the West in conversation over the dinner table with your friends. Some of these conversations are going to be difficult because people have been manipulated, but we need to do it anyway. Okay, we can't just live comfortable lives, not when the West is crumbling around us. We have to be brave. We have to speak the truth. We have to always speak with nonviolence, that of course, but that doesn't mean that we make any concessions to the lies that are being told, or that we buckle under the pressure of, under the social pressure, and refuse to defend the innocent who are being trampled over. No, that's not the defense of the West. We have to defend the Judeo-Christian ethics that we inherited from our ancestors, and which allowed us to build a West of liberties and rights and democracy, where the lives of tolerance, where everybody is equal under the law, and where we are all free to say what we think and to have reasonable discussions about any topic with anybody else. Okay, that's what is at risk. So let's all do our part. And I extended myself a little bit today, but this was a very interesting topic, and it had a lot of different angles. So I hope you guys were not too bored, and you all stayed with me till the end. And I hope to see you again next Thursday. Bye-bye.